One more important point to keep in mind is that what we see of these Egyptian temples these days are mostly broken down ruins. However, in their prime they were richly coloured, filled with symbols and images that all meant something, and in most cases meant several different things on different levels all at the same time. These were human development teaching centres with very high and powerful atmospheres. You couldn't just walk in and have a look around. For example, it took Pythagoras 20 years of preparation before he was even allowed into the outer level of one of these schools. In our times we are used to knowledge coming from books, but in these times they had specially developed teachers called hierophants, who were connected to higher levels of the universe. Their teachings were therefore live and universally connected, and were transmitted to the students via force and essence that accompanied the words and symbols. The whole of the universe is actually interested in the human race developing and evolving. So there has always been help coming from higher places to the human race through these special temples and teachers. So here is a quick little zoom in so you can see where the Temple of Man is located. It's in Egypt, and it is located about halfway down the Nile on its west bank, and is estimated to have been started around 1390 BC. It's very close to the Nile and is now a massive tourist attraction. Now, to give you some idea of what the temple complex itself looked like, here is a wonderful little 3D fly-through of the temple and its layout as it might have looked while it was still in use. Now I just want to touch upon the unique layout of this temple, because it really is the key to the whole thing. Some researchers in the 1930s, and these were researchers with some esoteric knowledge, rather than mainstream Egyptologists, had a hunch that the temple was laid out to the same proportions and dimensions as the human form. However, each time they tried to fit them together, it didn't quite work. One of the researchers remembered that it was common for the Egyptian artists to make a very clear delineation between the crown and the rest of the head. When they overlaid the human form with the temple foundations and cut it off at the crown of the head, it fitted exactly, as you can see in this diagram. I will explain more about why that is the case when we get to that part of the temple on our journey through it. So let's begin with the Sphinx processional. Along the approach to the entrance of the temple is an avenue of sphinxes. The image on the left gives us some idea of what they might have originally looked like. Now, in terms of the unseen worlds, how one approaches is always very important. For example, if you approach a tree carefully and respectfully, pausing at the edge of its radiation field to ask permission to enter its domain, it will let you approach, and its essence won't retreat down its trunk and into the ground to get away from you. So these sphinxes would have been highly charged, and we must keep in mind that in these ancient times the atmosphere around the temple would have been very dense and conductive. So it would have been like walking through a force field that would have burnt off any lower forces that you might have been carrying with you. Certainly if you approached with a misaligned attitude, or were just simply not ready to proceed, you would feel such unsettlement and contradiction that you would be forced to retreat. But before we continue, just take a moment to imagine yourself standing where our friend Trevor from New Zealand is standing in the picture, and that you can feel the powerful lance-like energy crossing the path in front of you. Now put into your mind that you are fortunate enough to be given access to very high esoteric knowledge that has been kept secret from the human race for thousands of years, and that you would respectfully desire to gain understanding and wisdom about the deeper purposes of life from this experience. So let's take a moment to do that before we proceed. So now, having passed through the A gate, we find ourselves in the open courtyard of Ramesses II. The images on the left-hand side, top and bottom, give us some idea of what this court might have originally looked like. The strange skew of the axis of the temple follows the extended leg of the figures of the marchers either side of the court. The emphasis of this entire hall is upon the forward leg, man in motion, living man. By skewing the axis, they were symbolizing humanity in action rather than humanity at rest. One might think, well, wouldn't it be better to just have a statue of a man running or looking all fit and sporty, as in the Greek statue on the left? He looks very casual compared to these standing Egyptian statues, doesn't he? Almost as if he is saying, hey, what's up, dudes? Well, of course, this is the profound difference between the two cultures, because running is a very physical, outer type of motion, and you can't do that without having to rest and recuperate at some point. Whereas these figures are shown as uniformly serene and very cool in their attitude and posture. The motion indicated here is electrical, and is to do with the persistent work of higher development, the unseen motion towards a higher spiritual state, from which there is no rest. You might also notice from our Ruby Mountain work that the male figures are standing with the left leg forward, which in terms of the pentagram is their white leg. One gets the sense that this court would have had a very powerful, mentality-based, neutral state that would not allow for lower emotion and opinion. Perhaps it was the white atmosphere of this section of the temple that the students were given the basic facts and information of the teaching about the human system and its purpose. At the northern end of this courtyard are two massive seated figures guarding the entranceway to the next temple section. These figures are positioned exactly where the knees would be on the human form. The images at the top left and right give some idea of how it would have looked. The knees might be a strange thing to focus upon, one might think, but that is really due to our own ignorance of the esoteric and energy functions of our human system. Firstly, when we are standing, our legs provide a direct flow of force from the planet into our bodies. We are connected and grounded to the earth through the legs. Sitting down completely changes that state. Also, think for a moment how amazing it is to have legs in the first place. There is a very ancient idea that the only reason we have legs is so we can walk around to find the right forces to fertilize our brains. Man in motion is about the search and the journey to find spiritual connection. Imagine trying to walk without knees. It is the knees that allow us to transfer will and intention into motion through our legs. Also, the shin and thigh bones are accumulators or storage batteries for force. When we stand or sit or kneel, it changes the access we have to these storage batteries, and therefore it changes our state. Although kneeling these days is often an act of submission, it was originally used in high esoteric instruction to temporarily interrupt the power supply from the lower leg bone accumulators, which power the lower sexual center, thus removing distraction and interference from that part of the student's system. It was a conscious position taken to separate themselves from the coarser levels of their personalities whilst they refined. We also see this understanding reinforced with the relief shown on the side of the cubic throne the figures are sitting upon. We can see the detail from this panel on the side of the throne in the bottom right-hand corner of this slide. The two figures represent the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt, which is symbolic of the unification and balance of the higher and lower systems of the human. If you look closely, you can see that both figures have their lower legs cut off at the knees, where the two separate blocks of stone are placed on top of each other precisely at the knee joint. What is also clear here is that we are about to change octave, or go to a higher level in the human system. A bit like climbing an unseen world's ladder. We are now moving from a very wide, open space into a constricted place of containment, and hence a more dense and concentrated electrical atmosphere. This colonnade was originally covered, and at either side of this narrow entrance are seated figures, not standing. This is clearly some kind of atmosphere compression gateway.